I'm going to show you just a little bit about pleating. Some people have asked what a pleater is. This is mine. It's a 24 row. It's the Super Amanda, and it has a hand crank on the one side where you can turn the rollers. The fabric will feed through these rollers here on top, and it has the needles across. The needles are a little bit different. They have a little curved edge. I should have pulled one out to show you. And then I have the needles threaded with orange hand quilting thread. That's what I always use. It's not going to show up real good on this red fabric. I didn't think about that, but I don't have any other hand quilting thread at home. I use orange usually because I don't smock in orange, so that I can see the rows really well. So I also have my fabric. I'm using linen this time, rolled up on my dowel rod, and I'm going to feed that through the rollers, and it's going to come out on these needles and be all pleated. I can't hold my camera and do that at the same time, so let me stop for just a minute and get this started, and then I will show you what it looks like. Okay, I have started pleating this, and right now they're all on the needles, all the little pleats, but as you can see, as it comes through, when I turn this knob here on the end, it comes out all pleated on the needles. You don't want to get them packed too full, so as it starts to come through, I'll pull it out. And you can see now, I'll get closer, there's little lines of thread running through this. Some people have asked, they've seen little pleaters on eBay where it pleats your fabric into little knife pleats that you can use for making skirts. It's not the same as this because these put the rows of stitching in there for you. So once I pull it off the needles, I can do a little bit more. It's kind of hard to do this one-handed because you want to hold your dowel, make sure it's coming through straight. And then I'll pull them off again after I get them packed full, and you just keep pulling them out onto your rows of thread. So let me finish this up and I'll show you what it looks like when it's all complete. My fabric is pleated now, and I squished all of my pleats really tightly together. It's really kind of hard to see. I'll get closer so you can see them. There, now you can kind of see. Let me zoom in here. I pack them all really tightly together so that there's no wrinkles, no bubbles, and I set it on my ironing board. So now I'm going to show you a couple of different ways to tie off when you take it off of your pleater. The first way is to block it before you start smocking. Block before you smock. I am not normally one of these girls, but I'm going to show you how to do it. It's a good thing to do. What you're going to do is you're going to measure your piece. So if my bodice needs to be 10 inches wide, I'm going to measure it, and I'm going to squish up the pleats so that it measures 10 inches wide. This measurement always includes the seam allowances, so you don't need to add those in. Then what I do is I tie off, I'm going to try and get closer, I tie off the rows in 2s and 3s so that they aren't going anywhere. And I knot it right next to it. I pick it out of the last ½ an inch of fabric, and then I knot it right next to that pleat. I know it looks kind of messy. So that way it's not going anywhere. And when I smock it, it is going to stay what I need it to stay. And then before you start to smock it, you're going to spray it really heavily with magic sizing or with best press or starch and let it dry. It does make a big difference if you can spray it ahead of time and let it dry, or get out your hair dryer and dry it. Your needle will go through better. It holds its shape so much better. I really do like to spray it ahead of time. Okay, or you can block it. You're going to block it anyway afterwards, but you can skip the blocking ahead of time, which means measuring it and make sure that it's going to fit your template. This is what I do. Ellie says it's super ugly, and she's right. I leave my strings long, and I tie a knot down here so that they're not going anywhere. I made the mistake one time of knotting them right next to the fabric without blocking it first, and that is a big mistake, because afterwards, when you're all done with your smocking, I smock pretty tightly, and when I took it over to my ironing board and I set it on my template, and I realized I needed to stretch it a little bit to fit the bodice, I couldn't stretch it because I had those knots in the side. So then I had to cut the knots, try and pull it. Your pleating threads are pulling out then. It was a mess. So I learned a long time ago, just give myself plenty of room. I knot it here so that they're not going anywhere. I have room to play afterwards to stretch it or pull it however I need to do. So here's my piece. I showed you both ways, whichever way you want to do it. There's probably a right or a wrong way, but I really think either way is fine. You're going to black it afterwards. The main thing is make sure your pleats are squished nice and tight when you spray that. I know this isn't going to be how you smock it, but when they're really nice and tight, I know it's really hard to see on this fabric. This is linen. It almost looks like it's just a solid piece of fabric. But when they're squished really nice and tight, you get rid of all those wrinkles and it will be so much easier to smock. So I am going to spray this, and then I'm going to show you how to start making the stitches. Okay, I started smocking a little bit here so that I could get started and show you. And I'm going to pull apart these pleats a little bit so you can see. I'm using 3 strands of DMC floss, white floss. I pulled them apart. In my smocking guide, I talk about stripping the threads. Basically, it just means pulling them out one by one out of the skein and then putting them back together, not just pulling them together. Some people even iron them just to make sure that they behave better. There's another thing that you can use. You won't need it with a DMC floss, but if you're using silk floss or rayon floss, there's Thread Heaven that you can get. It's a wax that you can just run your floss through. I use it a lot when I am using that kind of floss because it just makes it glide better. It doesn't get tangled up and things like that. But you won't need it if you're using something like DMC or Anchor floss. Okay, so I have a trellis stitch here that I just finished, so I'm getting ready to do my cable on the top row. You smock from left to right. When you put your needle in, you're going to put it in the top 1/3 of the pleat. So if you're looking at the distance of the pleat here, you just smock on the top 1/3, if that makes sense. And you always hold well, at least for these stitches, you hold your needle horizontally. So I just finished that. My thread is over here on this side. This is called an over cable because my thread is going to be on top of where my needle goes through. So I'm going to put it through the pleat like this and pull that through. And then it is the over cable. And if you look at my chart, it's got like a little, it looks like a half moon, and it goes this way. And then you're going to do your trellis stitches down. And same thing, you're in the top 1/3 of the pleat. Your needle is horizontal. Your thread is above the needle. I'm going to do 4 of these and I'll show you. This orange thread might make me go blind by the time I finish here. I should have put a different color in the hand quilting threads in the pleater. And then when you finish, so now I'm down at the bottom row. I know you can't see it, I can barely see it. All right, so now I'm down at the bottom row and I'm going to put my needle through. Now this time my thread is below. This is an under cable, so my thread is below. And I'm going to put it through horizontally like I did before, but see how the thread is below? And I'm going to pull that. Now this forms my under cable. And I'm going to start trellising back up with 4 stitches. Again in the top 1/3 of the pleat with my needle horizontal. One more thing I would say about the floss is when you cut your lengths of floss, try and get them so that you can go all the way across the row, all the way across the row without having to cut a new section, because it's kind of awful to have a knot halfway through. So try and get it so you can go all the way across. All right, and I'm back up at the top. Now see, my thread is on top. I'm going to do the same thing, put my needle through horizontally, and the thread makes a over cable, and then I can start trellising back down. So the main thing just to remember, I did this kind of sloppy while trying to videotape at the same time, but the main thing to remember is which way the thread goes. If you're doing an over cable, your thread is over the needle. When you come in, when you're trellising down, same thing. Then when you get down to the bottom, your thread is going to be underneath. You're going to poke it through this way, and your thread underneath. Same thing as you trellis back up, your thread will be underneath. So pretty easy. Those are just the 2 basic stitches. I'm going to do that across the row. Then I'm going to start here. Well, I'm going to start actually down on this row and go up. And my cables, if I did it right, should meet. So they're going to form little diamonds. This under cable here is going to be right above the over cable that you do on the next row. So I am going to keep working on this and not try and videotape at the same time so my stitches are more even, and hopefully this helped you.